Welcome to the California Avenue podcast. I'm your host, Unconventionally Black, UB for short, and this is a Black-centered space and place where all are welcome and where we discuss unconventional topics unapologetically from lived experiences and perspectives. I'm joined today by Kendall, marriage and family therapist. Say hey, Kendall.
Hello. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. And we're going to be talking about and addressing spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah, and in case you guys are wondering, it's a common saying that's said in the Black community in which, it's more of like a reasoning for why we may use like a form of corporal punishment to discipline our children so they're not spoiled. We're going to get into that more and why that is not necessary anymore and what other things could be more effective and helpful. Perfect that Kendall is here and she could give her professional input and opinion. So let's get into it. So Kendall, why do you believe that parents still engage in this form of discipline?
So I feel like there's definitely many different ways we can look at this. So I'll try to condense it. So one, I think one of the main reasons is because parents think it works. Like they feel like, spanking, hitting, or, that corporal punishment, they feel like it works. So, what is it like? Why reinvent the wheel? If it works, why fix it? However, it doesn't quite work in the way that maybe we want it to, right? So a lot of times parents, when the kid is doing something that we don't want them to do, something like an undesired behavior, like we're trying to get them to stop, and we hit them, a parent hits their child, the kid stops in a moment. They're like, oh, hold on, don't do that. So in the moment, it stops the behavior. Okay. However, in the long run, it doesn't really stop undesired behavior. It actually teaches a bunch of other different things that we don't really want, that will actually kind of like hinder the relationship with the child, their mental health, all these other things. So that's one view. And then there's also this view I know we hear a lot of is like tough love, right? Like if you act right in the home, then I know you're going to act right out in the world. And that really does, if kind of like reframe that sometimes, it's the thought of like protecting our children from how the world might see them or treat them if they don't act within societal norms, follow the rules, or whatever you want to say, right? So it's like tough love. If I don't do it, then we don't want people outside doing it. The question I like to pose though, which I would love to hear your thoughts on, this is the question I like to pose, is like when parents say like tough love, and if I don't do it here, then someone else will do it. And I'm like, okay, my question always then becomes like, okay, well then where do people learn soft love? Where do they get the affection from? So you got tough love, you getting yelled at, you getting hit, okay, and you know how to act. But then where do you learn how to love in a healthy way? Where do you learn to like a soft landing, like when things are hard, actually do get hard? Where do you learn those people who are going to be your safe place, your safe space? So I guess I always think for you, like for people I talk to when I bring this up, so I'm wondering for you, like, how do you feel like maybe even just out in public or kids that how do you feel like you see them acting in public and how their kids respond, like parents respond to them, and like do you see a shift in their behavior?
Like, do I see a shift in the behavior with the child?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's like a great question to ask parents. I feel like that's a good way to like really reflect, like, oh snap, I'm not really quite sure where that type of engagement happens, because the nurturing starts in the home. But yeah, so I really enjoy that question. As far as what I see in public and how children react when their parents are disciplining them, I feel like it's very much in the moment situation. It just kind of gets the child to like be a little stunned and just like stop in their place. But as far as actually addressing the behavior, I don't feel like there's any space for like learning and understanding why it is that that's not acceptable.
Absolutely. I love it. And I think that's the part that I think that's missing. Like you just said, why is that not acceptable? Why is running around in the street not a good idea?
Right.
Why is yelling and hitting not okay to do to your brother or sister or your friends on the playground? And you're right. And then it's so interesting. You said stunned, and I just could just see that, right? Like when you see like kids who are getting yelled at or hit, how they just kind of like stop. Like it's all like stunned, like it's almost like this fear, right? Of like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so interesting to think like, you know, they're trying to like learn and do these things, and then it's almost like they're stopped in the moment. And after that, all they can do is just stop in a moment. And then that next step of that lesson that needs to be learned, or that new message that they want to receive, is just stopped because they're stunned. Like you think like if you and I are stunned, like we're not going to hear what else is going on. We kind of freeze.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Nothing anyone else says around us is really going to sink in.
Right. Yeah, very true. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that it's also probably embarrassing as well, depending on how it's done, right? And defense mechanisms could come up even more so in that situation. And then exactly, are you really absorbing why it's wrong, or whatever else that parental figure is saying to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That is, yeah, it's just interesting that I hear you like talking and just kind of talking. Like I just keep seeing like the things that you're like the defense mechanisms of all the, like you just kind of picture it. And it's like, how can we expect kiddos to really understand what's going on if they're, you know, in that moment? Now, I do want to go back some, because I do feel like another reason why parents do this too is because they don't have any other tools. They don't know what else works. So they kind of go for what you know, right? Like that's how I grew up. I was fine. We hear that all the time. Like, look, I turned out okay, right? And then it's like, yes, you turned out okay, and also maybe there's a better way to do it. So I think that's the other part too, is like, I also don't want to like shame parents into thinking like, oh, you hit your kids, you do this, you do that, because it's also very understandable, especially for our community, that is kind of like a tool that we use because that's what we've been taught. And we can definitely go down like the whole historical sense of like why that is and all of that stuff. But what I will say, just kind of like sum it up, is that was a tool that was used that in this day and age, in this time period, is no longer necessary to be effective.
Message.
And there are other ways that we can, you know, teach our kids how to behave in ways that, you know, will keep them out of trouble and keep them in spaces where they can learn, feel safe, all those things. There's a bunch of other different tools, which I get that there are, you know, not always accessible to us. And definitely have some resources to share with y'all about that, though, because there's information out there. It's not really easy to find, especially for Black folks, to be honest, written by Black folks and all of that. So yes, I definitely feel like that is another reason why. So we don't have the tools. We haven't been taught the tools. And even when we try to teach the tools, it's not easy. I know, gentle parenting, right? People, that's the new term, gentle parenting. And then I've seen the things where it's like, I can't gentle parent if my kid isn't going to gentle kid. Right? Yes. Like, I get it. I have a 5-year-old and she is opinionated. She uses her voice and she's like, Mommy, I don't like that. And it is hard to be like, well, now I give her something to eat. And she's like, I don't want this anymore. And I'm like,
girl, you just asked me for that like 10 minutes ago. What do you mean you don't want this anymore?
However, like, she uses her voice and I, in the moment, get frustrated I have to slow myself down, take the deep breath, and then pivot or plan or decide to like, hey, kiddo, this is all we got for today. Like, I made dinner. It is what it is. And then deal with whatever big emotion she has after that. Gentle parenting is not easy. It takes a lot of like self-control as the caregiver in the kiddo's life. It takes lots of self-reflection, lots of self-awareness. I mean, it's also a lot of work. So sometimes too, I tell folks, I get why they want their impulse tells them to hit or to yell or do something like that, because that feels easier. However, understanding where that's coming from then allows us to slow it down so that we can learn those tools to regulate ourselves, calm ourselves down. Like, okay, just because she doesn't eat this dinner, it's not the end of the world. And then go, okay, what provide to her so that we can adjust in a way. And sometimes too, she's still not gonna like the answer and she's gonna have her meltdown. And then I have to, again, regulate myself to help her co-regulate and help her manage her big emotions too. It's a lot.
It is. It is. It's not for the meek. And I like how much you normalized and address that it's not something that we're trying to shame parents into doing gentle parenting. You really normalize the human reaction within us in any situation in which we get frustrated, and immediately we tend to act on that feeling. And it does definitely take time and a moment to regulate yourself in order to feel more adjusted. And I feel like just from my own practice of having to regulate myself, working with children and working in big mass with children, a lot of deep breaths were needed because it is stressful, and it's okay to feel that way. But the moment that you do take that time to regulate yourself and breathe, and you can come back into the situation and look at it more logically, and have more of a reaction that I feel like you would feel more comfortable with, and that the other person would be more receptive to hear. So yeah, and I like that you brought up gentle parenting. So from your educational and professional background or experience, what have you learned or resources have you come across that support gentle parenting?
Ooh, so there are definitely tons. If you Google it, there's different scholarly articles and all that stuff that are really great. There's some awesome Facebook groups that they have really done a great job of like curating to provide information, ask questions. So I'm sure you do those Facebook searches. Like, there's lots of amazing information out there. There's one too, is How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen. I love that book, because what it does is it again kind of explains to you why things are happening, and then gives you strategies on how to like manage those situations. So that's definitely, there's tons of books. There's another book, I'm trying to think, by Trina Green Brown, and it's Parenting and Liberation, Raising Black Children. And that is really great because it makes it very reflective on all these different things. Because I also want to kind of go back to like gentle parenting, yes, is also about, turning away from like corporal punishment and all that. But it also is about like really raising our kids to really be like, see them as human beings, as people. Like, they have options, they have choices, they do and don't like things. So even like, going to the park and understanding like, okay, what they taking, like, those risks of like jumping off of things and all, like really allowing them the space and the freedom to grow. That's also part of gentle parenting. And I think this book, Parenting for Liberation, is really great in talking about some more of like the historical stuff about why these things are really important for us to do, especially as Black folks, and like just generationally. And then also gives really cool like tips and reflective questions and stories to really help with that. And then there's also a podcast, Parenting for the Culture. That one's great because she has like, I believe her name is Cherise Sims. She has, I think, like 6 kids. I could be, you know, maybe like 5, between 5 and 7 kids. And she talks about all these different things from like a real life perspective of the things that she's handling, how she's handling it. And it's fun to listen to because she has amazing energy, and like the tips and things you kind of learn from her stories and her experience is awesome. So there's definitely lots of tools out there. And those, okay, I was gonna say too, those books on like how to talk so kids will listen, there's like a series of them. They're on Audible, which is really great, so that you can listen to them.
Perfect.
That's sometimes the key.
Yes. Yeah. Those are some amazing examples.
Yeah, no, I think those are definitely some of my go-tos. But I also tell folks to like find a therapist, find a licensed social worker to really connect to. And then there's different workshops. I know I've done a few workshops here and there on parenting. So there are people out there. I understand it is tough to find because it's not just like easily accessible, but it's out there. It is out there. And people are so excited about this new, I don't think it's a new way of parenting. I think it's just, we are starting to shift back to what was a style of parenting that we are rooted in. So I will say that, yes, I don't think it's new. I think it's just new terminology, yes, but I do feel like a lot of this is really us really kind of getting back to who we are as a culture, as a people, naturally, the nurturing, the softness, the caring, the protectiveness, and finding more effective ways to do it in today's age. Things that worked before, when Black folks were enslaved, and then Jim Crow, and then civil rights, like all these different things. And during those times, those were effective based on the environment. And even then, I'm sure that we could have modified all that stuff. But where we're looking at now, there are different ways that we can effectively do some of those same things that our ancestors, our parents, grandparents, great-great-grandparents, all of them were trying to do in the world that we live in now.
But yeah, I'm glad that those resources are readily available, and that there's a podcast where someone's speaking from their experience, because from my experience in the culture, I felt like majority of parents that I've came across like feel as if it's letting your kids get away with the behavior. And yeah, I'm curious, how do you address that with people that you work with?
Yes. Okay. So gentle parenting is not an absence of discipline and not an absence of structure. Actually, quite the opposite. So I like to use food as an example because I feel like that's the current situation we're dealing with our little one. So what I've learned is like gentle parenting outside of just like punishment is like, okay,
I have a turkey dog, and then I have peanut butter jelly sandwich. These are your options today. What would you like?
Right. Now, when I was growing up, here's your food, you eat it, and eat it all. No questions asked. So gentle parenting is not about like, hey, kiddo, I've made 10 different meals. You pick one, and then I'll just throw the rest of the food away. Before I even make it, I'm like,
hey, here are your options.
And sometimes I make the turkey dog, and she's like, I don't want that. And I'm like,
well, it seems like at the time when I asked you, you wanted that. That is what I made. That is the choice you made, and this is what you're having for dinner. Now tomorrow, we can have the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but today we've made this choice.
Right. So gentle parenting is about honestly like listening to your kiddo, giving them options within obviously the structure that you have too. So it's not just like, oh, whatever you want. You want to go to like get the most expensive dinner? Cool, let's go. No, it's like, hey, this is what I have in my refrigerator.
Yeah.
This is what we're gonna do. You pick. So even like, let's say, my daughter, she gets upset and she raises her voice at me. I'm not gonna go,
okay, Well, thanks for yelling at me.
It's very much so like, okay, I can see that you're upset. So let's do some deep breathing together. Okay. Now, I do not like when you yell at me. That is not something I like. Please don't use that voice with me again. But I want to hear what you're having to say because I see that you're upset. What are you upset about? Let me know. Right? It's still saying like, don't yell at me, but also still giving that space of like, but I see that you're upset. So you tell me what's going on too. So it's so interesting. We're just like, when people hear that, they're like, what do you mean? Like she yelled at you? And I'm like, yes, but there was the root to the behavior that I still have to figure out. I set the expectation.
Don't do that.
And then also, okay, what can I do so next time you know? And let's take our deep breaths. You see how that made you feel more calm? Yeah. Okay, great. And then when you're ready to tell me what's going on, I'm ready to listen.
Beautiful.
Thank you. But I will say too, that is not easy because I didn't grow up being able to yell at my parents. Mm-hmm. So, and I will say that she's not allowed to yell at me, not at all. But she's 5 though. So there are lots of adults who don't know how to not yell at people.
I really like that approach. I'm sure it's, like you said, it's not easy, right? Because that's not how you were raised. And it's like unlearning like those behaviors from previously. And I'm also hearing it's knowing your own capacity, and being able to provide options that are within your capacity that you know that you can give, and then also understanding your little one's capacity. And I think that is like key with this conversation and understanding behavior. If it wasn't for developmental psych, that class, I would have never known about just the different stages that children go through and what is actually like an age-appropriate behavioral response to those types of behaviors, and understanding that it is part of their development. I learned a lot about Erik Erikson and his 8 stages of psychosocial development. And I really feel like it tells the importance of creating a safe attachment, especially at an early age. That first stage is trust versus mistrust. And that's in infancy, you know? So it's really based on how that parental figure is able to create that safe attachment, and how that attachment will influence the children who are attempting to make sense of their world and what contributions they can make to the world. Understanding, this also creates their sense of like adventure and like wanting to contribute and do different things, and creativity. That's how it's formed, through creating that safe attachment. How do you feel about those developmental kind of educational?
I'm trying to think, because there's the one I know, was it 6 to 11? I can't remember offhand, but the one part of it is inferiority. And I feel like, I kind of focus on that age. I feel like around that age is kind of where you see a lot more of like the spanking and the corporal punishment in that way. And I know for that one, when that happens, it really kind of teaches kids, like when you use that as like they are incapable of doing things, you really see like a decline in like their confidence and stuff like that. Like they learn to like mistrust people. So like you said, it really does make a difference. And you're right, like again, we talk about capacity within those different stages, it is important. So like for the 1 to 2 year old, the deep breathing, I would do that with them. And then of course you do it in a fun way, so they kind of like learn how to do it. But you do that with them. As they get older, it's becoming like reminders. I'll do it, you do it. Then it's a reminder. Then it's like, hey, you kind of expect them to do on their own as they get older. So it is a process developmentally on how they learn how to use these tools. And then also though too, and how to use these tools so that they can calm down Also, though, how you respond to them does impact, like you said, how they see themselves, how they see the world, and how they learn to like trust people. And it really does also too, and like you said, impact their attachment. So a lot of times, I think researchers found, like, as far as like kiddos go, if their parents did use like corporal punishment or spanking or hitting or anything like that, right? What they found is that there's a higher risk for them to have mental health issues. But then also a higher chance of them having that insecure attachment. So insecure attachment shows up in different ways. Again, it makes it harder for them to trust other people. And then two, you might see it in kind of like later on in life, as far as like intimate relationships, maybe friendships too. So it's like they're either really clingy or they like far away from close relationships. They're not really in that space to really feel comfortable in close relationships, because when they were growing up, the folks that they were in close relationships with used physical force to discipline them. So they're like, oh, okay, this person loves me, but they hit me. And that didn't feel good, but they said they loved me. I'm doing this because I love you. And it's like, wait.
Well, this is love. I don't want it.
Or it's like, okay, well, I'm going to cling to this person, do everything I can to keep them. They're not angry at me, and so they won't hurt me. So they just like cling on, people please, all that stuff. Or like I said, they're like, no, nothing to do with it. That's love. That's not for me. So there's these long-term effects, like we said in the beginning, right? In the moment, it's helpful. In the long run, not so much.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And yeah, the ACEs study definitely tells more about like what happens when you grow up in those kind of environments, or environments that aren't supportive of that child's development. So thank you so much for giving such great examples of why attachment and having an early secure attachment with your parentals is important, and how that can affect that individual's development, and what type of behaviors we would even see later on in life due to that insecure attachment style. So yeah, beautiful examples. Yeah. So I do have another question. So how can we encourage other individuals to explore techniques of gentle parenting and find appropriate tools for emotion regulation?
Ooh, yes. I think, well, I know one of the main reasons why we should be kind of looking to this, I can say, again, like I was saying before, it's hard to say new way of parenting, but it really does, because it really helps us develop like the humanization of kids, right? Like they're their own people. They're not just our kids. Like they're their own person. I think that is one of the great benefits of it, is it really allows kiddos to have this space of growing and developing into who they are truly and authentically. That's one. Two, it's helpful for you too, because then when you get older, it'll either, if you're the kiddo, you will have a better relationship with your own parents, and as a parent, have a close relationship with your kiddo as they get older. It really does help really create like amazing, beautiful bonds if we can learn how to structure and provide space at the same time and discipline for our kiddos, that they can grow, but then also find that, like I said earlier, that soft place, that loving and nurturing place to come back to when things get hard in the outside world, right? I think also too, one way to encourage it is just to normalize all of it. Like, it is hard being a parent. We have been taught so many different things of what could and should and all these things, not even just in like how we discipline our kiddos, but in all the things, what they should be reading, wearing, eating, all those things, right? Like, we're always told all these things, but what we should and shouldn't do. I guess, so one of the main things is normalizing that this is hard. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I always tell folks too, the beautiful part in making the mistakes is the repair after, is showing your kiddo like, hey, guess what? I messed up and I'm going to come to you and apologize. So in the future, one, they're not as afraid to make mistakes. And two, they know what it looks like to repair when those mistakes are made. So normalizing that we don't know what we're doing sometimes. I think there's that. And then two, like not being afraid to like return again to like the parenting styles that we're truly rooted in, that nurturing, that loving, all of those pieces that are really naturally us. Now, granted, I understand, you know, backgrounds and, you know, the ways other people grew up and all that stuff. That also means learning yourself, regulating, and really tapping to your own self-awareness. So then you, again, teach that to your little ones who are in your life so that they can do the same things. And you are now creating this generational strength within your family of being able to be like, hey, like, you know what? I'm having a hard time. I need to take some deep breaths. Maybe we should take them together. You know what? I yelled at you. I should not have. That was my mistake. I'm going to do these things so it doesn't happen again. I apologize. And then now there's that generational strength of accountability and learning how to repair those kind of like ruptures when things happen. So many other things too. I think those are like the things to like start off with.
yeah, there's a lot to this. It's very complex. But yeah, I think those are great examples of what benefits there are with practicing gentle parenting. And the generational strength, I was like, because it truly is a strength to be able to sit with yourself and sit with your discomfort and learn how to repair and show your children your capacity, right? Because it's like to do the repairing and provide that space for them and show that there can be a safe space for that. Because I do feel like it is extremely hard. And as, you know, ethnic minorities, we have so many environmental stressors and expectations that are placed on us that it creates a lot of like buildup and tension. And I feel that we haven't even put in the practice for ourselves, right? For that repair, and know that there's a space for self-compassion for us. So I think it's great that you brought that up. And yeah, I definitely believe that children are learning from your interactions. And if you become emotionally distressed, which is a human reaction that we all will experience throughout our whole lives, you know, do you give yourself that self-compassion? Are your children seeing how you are able to, like you said, repair and come back to this nurturing place? Because I'm sure very much research promotes, you know, more compassion when going through difficulty. I feel like it allows you to, again, come back into the situation more logically, and not from an emotional mind, but from like a wise mind.
Yeah.
And teaching and modeling the tools with them. I love that you said you do your deep breaths with the kids, and like what age group would be best for that. Yeah, those self-regulation tools are very, very much needed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also, you know, a whole tribe out there that is practicing this now. You provided plenty of resources throughout the podcast. There are also parents on Instagram that are teaching gentle parenting. Destiny.Ann is one, and Consciously Lisa is another great Instagram I guess influencer for gentle parenting. But they're parents themselves, and they're mothers, Black women. So, you know, I think seeing those examples and building that tribe and that village of that support is definitely necessary.
Absolutely. Like you said, community, building community.
Yeah, and support groups. I'm sure there are plenty of support groups out there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for taking the time out to express and explain some of these more gentle approaches to parenting.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to share knowledge, because I think that is one of my favorite things to do. Like I said, I understand that therapy and all these different, financially committed resources aren't accessible to all of us. So I try my best to share where I can, what I can. In the more general sense, I definitely, of course, advocate for therapy and all the things, but, try and share what I can.
Well, your knowledge is appreciated.
Thank you.
And I would love to have you back.
Absolutely.
We will be having an episode later on regarding parental wounds. So that's going to go more into what happens, what type of things show up later on in life when not so gentle parenting is happening.
Right.
Yeah. But thank you guys for joining us here on the California Avenue podcast. I'm your host, UB. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We drop episodes every Friday at 1 p.m. So please like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification to stay updated on all future episodes. Until next time, peace out.